In the last movie, we learned how to execute our first PHP script, but we didn't really talk about what it means. So in this movie, we're actually going to break it down and start to understand a little bit of the way PHP works. So let's start by looking at the command that we just typed and executed. There are three parts here. There's the $PHP, then there's a space before we get to the next part, which is PHP info, parentheses, and then semicolon. There's a space and the greater than. I want to look at the first and third parts of that, which are the tags that tell it to begin and end PHP commands. We talked about in the introduction that PHP can be embedded in HTML, and this is the mechanism that makes that happen. When our server accesses the web page, it knows to be ready for PHP because we have the .php extension, but it still needs some indication of where HTML starts and stops and where PHP starts and stops. And we do that by telling it, okay, turn on PHP. And we do that with the $PHP. Start filtering with your PHP filter. And when we're done with all of our PHP commands, we put ? and the greater than side. So you'll hear me often refer to these as start PHP, open PHP, or an open PHP tag. I might just call it the PHP tag. That's what I'm talking about when I say this, and you'll get used to it, and it'll become really commonplace for you. Now, there are some variations on this that you should also be aware of. There are the short open tags, and this is considered bad form. And in PHP 3 and before that, it was very common to see these, and that's to exclude the PHP from it. And you might even have an equal sign immediately after the ? But this just says turn on PHP, turn off PHP. Most of the time, this will still work for you, but it's considered bad practice. And you really want to always go ahead and say, what I mean here is PHP, by specifically writing those letters, PHP, after the first ? You have the option of telling your web server whether or not to allow these, and you can see whether that's set in that PHP info that we looked at, and changing it in your php.ini file. There's another type of tag, which are the ASP style tags. And if you're familiar with active server pages that Microsoft has, you'll be familiar with these tags because that's how ASP tells its web server to embed ASP into HTML code. And that's done with the % instead of the ? You can use ASP-style tags, but you have to enable them in the php.ini file. This is considered very bad form, and there's a really good reason why this is bad form, and that's because it doesn't always work. Obviously, if you write a PHP file and you use these kind of tags, and I take your code and I put it on my server, and my server doesn't allow the use of these kinds of tags, then suddenly your code won't work and it won't process. So we want to stick with these standard tags